Welcome to BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. Our top stories. Nigerian officials say more than 300 schoolboys taken captive by gunmen last week are safe and well and on their way home. A Moroccan man is sentenced to life in prison for attempting to kill passengers on a French high-speed train. We speak to one of the passengers who overpowered the gunman.
Long story short, Spencer Stone choked him unconscious while I was hitting him in the head with his AK-47.
US cybersecurity experts say a major hacking campaign uncovered this week posed a grave risk to the government's nuclear stockpile. Politicians are blaming Russian intelligence. And the British actor Jeremy Bulloch, who played Boba Fett in the original Star Wars trilogy, has died aged 75. Hello and welcome to our viewers on PBS in America and around the globe. First, hundreds of schoolboys kidnapped in northern Nigeria last Friday have been released. The governor of Katsina State says 344 children are on their way back from the forest where they were being held. Now, the BBC's Nigeria correspondent, Mayeni Jones, is in Kano in Katsina. She says the news obviously comes as a huge relief to the parents.
So the state government has told the BBC that 344 boys have been released and that they're currently on their way from a forest in the neighboring state of Zamfara to the state capital of Katsina in northwestern Nigeria. We're not clear on whether that's the total number of boys who were abducted. There was always some doubt as to exactly how many boys had been taken. The state government says it could be anywhere from 340 to 400 boys. Boko Haram claimed that they took 523 boys. So there is some questions about how many boys have been released and whether it's all of them. In terms of responsibility, the extremist group Boko Haram have claimed that they were responsible for the attack. The state authorities say that it was local criminals, kidnappers for ransom, with some connection to the extremist group. All of this news comes off the back of a video allegedly coming from Boko Haram on Thursday that showed dozens of young boys looking distressed in the forest, begging the Nigerian government to call back their troops and saying that some of their peers had been killed in airstrikes. According to state officials, that's not the case. All of the boys that they've recovered are alive. This will be great news for their parents, some of whom have been waiting anxiously at the school where the boys were taken last Friday, waiting for news. There have also been protests in Katsina State calling for President Buhari to bring back security to the state. It's unclear what the authorities intend to do to avoid this type of incident moving forward. Schools in the regions are currently closed until they're able to figure out how to keep them more secure.
Mayeni Jones there. Next, a French court has sentenced a Moroccan man to life in prison for attempting to kill passengers on a high-speed train. The attack 5 years ago was stopped by passengers, including off-duty American soldiers. They overpowered Ayoub El-Kazani on the Amsterdam to Paris express train. Well, a little earlier, I spoke to Alec Scarletos, a former US Army National Guard soldier who, along with fellow Americans Spencer Stone and Anthony Sadler, overpowered the gunman. I asked his reaction to the life in prison sentence for El-Kazani.
Honestly, I'm just glad that he got the maximum allowed under French law. It's a huge relief that he'll at least be locked up for the foreseeable future anyway.
And large part of that, of course, thanks to your efforts, you and your friends on that train in those moments. If it's okay, just take us back to that moment when you first realised what was going on, a man with a gun in your train carriage. What happened next?
Well, I mean, I just heard a gunshot and breaking glass and a train employee running away from the noise, and I looked back to see who he was running from, and there was a shirtless man with an AK-47. I ducked down behind my seat. Spencer Stone was on the aisle seat next to me, and waking up from a dead sleep, he turned around and saw the terrorist and ducked next to me, and I just hit him on the shoulder, said something to the effect of, "Let's go," or "Go get him." And to Spencer's credit, he ran straight at the guy and tackled him, and then I followed him, and then Anthony Sadler followed me.
And can you remember what on earth was running through your mind during those moments?
To be honest, I just thought that there was There was just no way. It was like a sense of disbelief. Like I knew it was actually happening, but my mind just thought, there's no way this is real life. But of course it was, and it was just a sense of fear and dread of knowing that this is how we die. But fortunately, we got incredibly lucky.
Yeah, of course. But just tell us how you eventually overpower and then restrain him?
Well, long story short, Spencer Stone choked him unconscious while I was hitting him in the head with his AK-47.
That's pretty, comprehensive, yeah. And then, of course, I've heard you say before, then your training kind of kicked in after that and you realised, right, there could be other threats on the train, things like that.
Absolutely. I took the AK-47 and charged the weapon and realized that he had actually attempted to fire it, but the ammunition failed. And then I checked the rest of the train to look for any other wounded passengers or even terrorists. And then Spencer, who was an EMT in the Air Force, crawled over and stopped the bleeding of Mark McGallion, who was shot in the neck prior to our involvement attempting to disarm the terrorist.
And then I suppose it must have been a pretty overwhelming feeling once you'd done all that, and then suddenly you take a moment to think what could have been. If you hadn't have been there in that train carriage, what could have happened?
Absolutely. Honestly, that didn't sink in for quite some time. We were just kind of in awe of what had happened. I mean, we were really just doing it to save each other and save ourselves. That's why I don't really like to be called a hero, because we didn't really have any other option. There was no escape for us. We just did what we did to save each other. I mean, we've all known each other since we were, young kids, and it all worked out, I think, the way it was supposed to.
Well, I'm afraid you certainly are heroes, and you have the medals to prove it, so there's no getting away from it. Can you just reflect on how life has changed for you since then?
It's changed completely for all of us. I mean, we're still in touch with Mark McGallion and Chris Norman, and I think, especially for the three of us, me, Spencer, and Anthony, it's really changed the trajectory of where we thought our lives were headed and kind of turned them on their heads, I guess.
And what now for you? You looked at politics, I believe.
Yeah, I looked at politics, ran for Congress here in Oregon, and lost this November, but I haven't given up completely yet, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, good luck to him, Alec Escarlatos there. Right, let's get some of the day's other news now. A panel of experts in the United States has voted in favour of granting emergency approval to Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine. The US Food and Drug Administration is expected to authorise its use on Friday, paving the way for 6 million doses to start being shipped as early as this weekend. India's Supreme Court has refused to block large-scale farmers' demonstrations, saying they have the right to protest, as long as there's no violence, they said. The court was responding to petitions complaining about closed roads. Thousands of farmers have been protesting for 3 weeks against new laws they say will harm their profits. Aid agencies in Fiji say Cyclone Yasa has caused extensive damage to homes, crops and infrastructure, but early reports suggest fewer casualties than had been feared. The powerful Category 5 storm made landfall on Thursday with winds gusting over 300 kilometres an hour. Now, the UK's Brexit negotiator, Lord Frost, has suggested that progress in trade talks with the EU seems blocked and time is running out. His comments came after Boris Johnson set out his concerns during a telephone conversation with the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. Now, much is resting on the talks for businesses who are still not clear what the next few weeks hold. As the closest UK port to mainland Europe, Dover handles 17% of the UK's trade in goods. From there, Simon Jack reports.
There are long delays because of lorries waiting to get into the docks into Dover.
This might be the most important trade route in Europe, the approach to Dover. 9,000 lorries a day transport nearly a fifth of all goods bought and sold in the UK.
Avoid the A2 in that area at all costs.
That wasn't an option for these drivers this morning.
Here on the road, 6 hours.
6 hours in traffic.
There are still 2 weeks to go before the biggest change in decades to trade with our biggest partner. So is Dover ready?
The port is as prepared as we can be. We've been at this for 4 years now. I think the most uncertain thing is how prepared is business to trade post 1st of January. There's an aspect of our operation where certainly if we add some additional friction to it, it's going to slow things down. But the critical thing will be is that at what point is that a tipping point? Because it will take 24, 36 hours via other routes to do the same thing that we can do in about 6 hours via this route.
Dover is the most important artery serving the bloodstream of UK business, and the challenge ahead is set against the logjam of other issues. Disruption coming out of China, people bringing Christmas stock, Brexit stockpiling, and on top of that, in 14 days, a whole new set of procedures for the first time in decades, requiring paperwork that many businesses haven't mastered, which they will need, deal or no deal.
At the moment, they seem to be stuck in Calais.
Logistics Director Adam Shooter said he's seen truck movements rise 50% as traders scramble to get stuff in before year end. He said his customers haven't been given all the information they need.
The detail is not there, and because the detail is not there, people are saying, yes, we need to get ready, but they don't know what to do, and in lots of respects, I think they're just giving up, and I think they're just saying, we'll wait and see what happens.
Brexit will mean 200 million additional customs declarations, requiring tens of thousands of customs agents that we don't have, according to a man who is training new agents.
It could well be that we have a chronic shortfall of customs agents, but it's the export side of things. That's what really worries me, because if you want to take your goods to France, you've got to do an export from now on. And if you've got no means of doing that, it's going to be hard to find that means when it comes to the 1st of January, because if you came to our company, we'd almost certainly turn you away, and most other agents would as well. We just don't have the staff to take on the additional work.
The government has provided grants for training new agents and will waive requirements for customs forms on imports till July. But this isn't about lorries, it's about toys, car parts and building supplies going undelivered. Supply chains are fraying before the UK's journey into the unknown. Simon Jack, BBC News, Dover.
Wildfires have raged across the world this year, with substantial blazes in Australia, Brazil and the US. But as a paper published in the journal Science notes, the dangers of these fires go beyond their destructive flames. The smoke they produce could be a significant route for spreading infections. Well, Lida Kobzai is a co-author of the paper and associate professor of wildfire science at the University of Idaho. Thank you so much for coming on the programme.
Glad to be here.
So, of course, we know all about the dangers of smoke, but there's something extra here. What's being carried in the smoke? Can you explain that to us?
Absolutely. So in the past couple of years, we've had direct evidence that has shown that not only is particulate matter and gas moved in the smoke, but also microbial organisms, things like fungi and bacteria. So high concentrations of these organisms are being aerosolized through the combustion process and then moved in a smoke plume and following the smoke plume wherever that smoke plume goes.
And the problem is, I guess, that these huge plumes of smoke can travel huge distances.
We think that they do. We know that smoke plumes do. We don't quite know exactly how long the microbes kind of hitch a ride on the particulate matter in the smoke. And that's exactly the reason that we put this article out, is because we really want to inspire people to look further into this question. Now that we understand that smoke is alive, that it's actually not just a physical potential ailment, it's also potentially a biological ailment. We need to have more investigation and more different types of scientific disciplines working together to address all of the questions that this brings up.
OK, so if you've got these microbes, living organisms, whatever, floating in the smoke, what kind of damage can they do to people?
Well, we don't know yet. It might be that they are innocuous. It might be that they're harmful. We actually don't have the answer to that question yet. What we know is that they seem to be attached to the particulate matter. So if particulate matter is being breathed in by people who are inundated during smoke episodes, during fire seasons, then they are probably breathing in those organisms as well. Whether or not they're occurring to such a concentration that would potentially cause damage to human airways, that's something that's unknown, but we think it's very important to find out.
OK, Lida, I just have to ask, briefly, because we're out of time, I'm afraid, but everything comes back to coronavirus, of course, at the moment. Is there any relation here?
We don't have any information about that.
So we're not worried about coronavirus and viruses in general spreading in plumes of smoke. At least that's one reassuring note-ish to take away. But thank you very much for coming on and talking to us. That's Lida Kobzai. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay with us on BBC News. Still to come. We'll reveal what happened when our Moscow correspondent got the chance to put questions directly to President Putin.
Saddam Hussein is finished because he killed our people, our women, our children.
The signatures took only a few minutes, but they brought a formal end to 3.5 years of conflict that has claimed more than 200,000 lives. Before an audience of world leaders, the presidents of Bosnia, Serbia and Croatia put their names to the peace agreement.
The Romanian border was sealed and silent today. Romania has cut itself off from the outside world in order to prevent the details of the presumed massacre in Timișoara from leaking out.
From sex at the White House to a trial for his political life, the Lewinsky affair tonight guaranteed Bill Clinton his place in history as only the second president ever to be impeached.
This is BBC News. I'm Lewis Vaughan-Jones. The headlines. Nigerian officials say more than 300 schoolboys taken captive by gunmen last week are safe and well and on their way home. A court in France jails a Moroccan man for life after finding him guilty of a terror attack on a Paris-bound train in 2015. Next, the two departments that manage the United States nuclear stockpile say hackers have gained access to their networks. The US Energy Department and the National Nuclear Security Administration are the latest government agents to be targeted as part of a massive cyber attack that some analysts and politicians have blamed on Russian intelligence. Our Washington correspondent, Lebu Diseko, says the breach is serious.
The Department of Homeland Security's own cybersecurity agency saying that this poses a grave risk to the US government. And for days now, we've heard more and more agencies saying that they have been affected. The Treasury, the Department of Homeland Security, the Pentagon, and as you said, those two agencies that are in charge of the US nuclear stockpile. And this has been going on since March, so a full 9 months that hackers have been really at the heart of the network and able to get this information. Now, CISA also said that the hackers didn't just use one way of getting into the system, so it's likely to be wider than we think at the moment, or wider than we've seen, and the attack is still ongoing, so very serious.
And do we know who's behind it?
Well, as you said, Russia is being widely blamed. That's certainly what the US media is saying. But the Trump administration has not yet formally blamed Moscow. Moscow itself, the embassy here, has said that the allegations are baseless.
And what about trying to protect this information, Lever? How does one go about doing this?
I imagine it would be quite a job. I mean, CISA and the FBI have joined up with another agency and they're trying to deal with this. CISA is working with the various affected agencies and trying to tell them what to do. But I imagine it must be huge. They've said that actually getting the hackers out and cleaning out the foreign agency or whatever the attacker is going to be incredibly difficult. The FBI is investigating and trying to find out exactly what happened, but it is going to be quite a job. And as I said, the attack is still ongoing and we don't know how many other agencies, companies, people were affected.
Thanks to Lebu there. Next, Russia's president has dismissed claims that his security services had anything to do with the poisoning of Kremlin critic Alexei Navalny. Vladimir Putin said if they'd been behind the attack on Ms. Navalny, who's still recuperating, they would have finished the job. President Putin was appearing at his annual news conference in Moscow. Steve Rosenberg was there.
This was something new, video conferencing with Vladimir. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, for his annual end-of-year news conference, Russia's president took social distancing to the extreme and stayed at home. For 4.5 hours, journalists competed for a chance to ask the Kremlin leader a question. Mr. President, I ask, after 20 years in power, don't you accept at least some responsibility for the new Cold War between Russia and the West? Or are the Russian authorities squeaky clean?
I feel responsible for what's going on in Russia, for its people, and I will do everything in the interests of Russia. As for being squeaky clean, we are, compared to you. You promised that NATO wouldn't expand to the east, but you didn't keep your word.
I asked too about Mr. Putin's most vocal critic, Alexei Navalny. Experts in Sweden, France and Germany confirm he was poisoned by Novichok. Can you explain to me, Stephen, President Putin says, why can't they provide us with an official report about the use of this Novichok? You're asking me? I reply. I'm the journalist here, I say. I ask the questions. I'm sorry, replies Mr. Putin. I'll continue to answer it. Now that is rare. An apology to a BBC correspondent from the President of Russia. Steve Rosenberg, BBC News, Moscow.
The British actor Jeremy Bulloch, who played Boba Fett in the original Star Wars trilogy, has died aged 75. His agent said he died in hospital from health complications after living with Parkinson's disease for many years. He was best known for playing bounty hunter Boba Fett in The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi. The character has since featured in the second season of Star Wars spin-off series The Mandalorian and the Doctor Who series in the 1970s. Right, well, with me is our news reporter, Paul Hawkins. So, Paul, for people, should we start for people who aren't big fans of this series? Yep. Explain to us who he was and what was happening.
Right, OK. So the role he's best known for was Boba Fett, who is on the left-hand side in this picture here. The bounty hunter, the Mandalorian bounty hunter in the Star Wars films, not one of the main characters. For people who've never watched Star Wars, you've heard of Darth Vader, you've heard of Princess Leia, Luke Skywalker, all the rest of it, not the bounty hunter probably. So he appears in 2 of the original 3 films, the Empire Strikes Back, The Last Jedi, Return of the Jedi, I should say, and he doesn't appear in many scenes, doesn't have many lines. The voice was actually done by another actor like Darth Vader. So Jeremy Bulloch didn't do the voice, but he did play the actor. And likewise, as Dave Prowse, who played Darth Vader, he had to have some physical presence on stage, the way the character moved, etc. So he actually based it on Clint Eastwood's The Man with No Name, that infamous Western character, because both had capes, both moved slowly, the way they held their gun. He based it on that. So that's what he's best known for. There's actually one bit of trivia, which is that there's a famous scene in which Princess Leia shouts out, "It's a trap," to Luke Skywalker. And Jeremy Bulloch actually also played the Imperial officer. There you can see him in the background. Played the Imperial officer who then marches Princess Leia off set. So he played 2 characters, different characters in the same film, which not a lot of people know. And actually, he went and they didn't have anyone to play that character, so he went and grabbed the costume. And 20 minutes later, he was on set.
Which is good versatility from him and good trivia from you. So what kind of tributes then have been coming in for him?
So Mark Hamill, who played Luke Skywalker, has tweeted the quintessential English gentleman. He's described him as a fine actor, delightful company, and so kind to everyone. Billy D. Williams, who played the original Lando Calrissian, said, "Today we lost the best bounty hunter in the galaxy." George Lucas, Star Wars creator, has called him the perfect combination of mystery and menace to his performance of Boba Fett. And his family have said he had a long and happy career spanning more than 45 years. He was devoted to his wife, 3 sons and 10 grandchildren, and they will miss him terribly. Also, another bit of trivia, he also featured in 3 James Bond films.
Excellent stuff. Thanks for that, Paul. That's Paul Hawkins. Right. When you think of Christmas songs, Mariah Carey and Bing Crosby come to mind. But now there's competition. This is Ember the Singing Dog and her owner, composer Nick Harvey. They've gone viral with their unique take on the Christmas classics. So what's next for them? Well, who knows? But I do know that they sang out our colleagues on BBC World a little earlier.
Somehow still we see the light above the...
Well, the dog was great. I apologise for the newsreaders. Bye-bye.